Hello and welcome to Real Menopause Talk. My guest today is Susan Bowman. Susan is a dyslexia tutor, a mother of 3 children, and a specialist menopause yoga teacher. She is some years post-menopause. So today she shares her retrospective on her peri to post-menopause experience and what she may have done differently with the knowledge she has today. We met up to discuss it all. Lovely to meet you, Susan.
Pleasure. Lovely to meet you.
Tell us a little bit about your background, your work, your family, and so on.
Well, my name is Susan and I'm 61 years old. I've got 3 children. My eldest daughter is 27. She's currently living in New York. And my 2 sons, 25 and 17, live with me at home with my partner. I work part-time as a dyslexia tutor at a local primary school. I'm also a yoga teacher. I teach 3 classes a week at the moment. But I did a specialist yoga teacher training a year ago in menopause yoga, which was taught by a woman called Petra Kovney. The whole idea about menopause yoga is it's equipped me to run workshops for women. The main aim of the whole workshop is to share information, to give women an opportunity to get together in a safe space to maybe talk about their experiences, their difficulties perhaps, share information, really talk about the various options that might be out there for people, which can include HRT options, the alternative routes, looking at lifestyle, diet, exercise, all the things that you are very familiar with, to empower women so that they have the information and knowledge to go and get the help that they may need to help them through this period. So I feel quite passionate about it, as you no doubt do too.
Absolutely, yes. How was your own perimenopause?
I mean, this is partly why I find myself doing what I'm doing now. I think like a lot of women, especially, well, maybe not especially, but a lot of women went through their perimenopause and menopause in complete ignorance, and I was certainly one of them. So I'm probably 10 years now into my menopause. It was probably about 10 years since my last period. So I'm very much post-menopause, but have still had, have had symptoms probably throughout the whole transition, but didn't realise that what was actually happening to my body was anything to do with the menopause, because I was completely ignorant. I've really only come to discover the information that is out there very recently, really in the last 2 or 3 years, and particularly around the time of doing this specialist training. And I almost feel quite embarrassed that I knew so little about my own body, what was going on with my body, and so little about perimenopause. I don't even know if I'd heard of the word perimenopause. The only thing I knew about the menopause, I think, looking back retrospectively, was that your period stopped and you might get hot flushes. Well, I didn't get hot flushes, but I had terrible night sweats. But I was completely oblivious to joining the dots between the symptoms that I did experience and now know that they were menopausal symptoms. I now know that with the retrospective hindsight. And I also sought medical help for a number of the symptoms. And not only did I not join the dots, the doctors that I saw didn't join the dots. Nobody ever said to me, well, you're whatever age, 48 years old or 52 years old, you've got X, Y, and Z symptom, so the chances are this is a menopausal symptom and this is what we could do for you. That never happened. Now that I know a lot about menopausal symptoms and what the menopause is, it's a reaction to our body's huge depletion in estrogen, I actually feel quite annoyed that I've kind of missed out on possibly 10 years of having my estrogen topped up through HRT, which I personally think is something that all women should know about. I'm not suggesting that all women should take it, but they should certainly know that HRT is there and it's available. They should know the truth about HRT, because there's still an awful lot of myths floating around which should be long buried. Even amongst the medical profession, even though that a lot of doctors and healthcare professionals are really taking on board this new explosion of information, it's just the tip of the iceberg, I think. I know a lot of women that have got, and myself included, have gone to their local GP, and it's a lottery, really, as to who you see. And it shouldn't be a lottery. You know, we should all have equal access to good health care. 51% of the population are going to have the menopause, and therefore we have a right to have this information so that we can manage it. And it is a very manageable, biological, normal process, but so many people are debilitated by it.
What, with hindsight, were your principal symptoms?
Well, I had, the one that I did know was menopausal, was I did suffer from really bad night sweats. I mean, I would just soak the bed often and get towels out and lie between towels. And I thought, oh, well, if that's all that I've had, then I've really sailed through the menopause. But of course, I also had things that I now know retrospectively. So I had very, very bad aching joints, which I thought was some sort of sciatica. And I had my third child when I was 44. And I think I had a terrible, terrible aching hip, probably when I was about 48. And I had it for about a year. That also came with a huge amount of fatigue and exhaustion. And I remember often going up to Oxford Street with my daughter when she was very keen on shopping in Topshop. And after about half an hour of walking around, I was like a very elderly woman needing to sit down for a rest. And I thought this was very odd. Never ever thought it was to do with menopause. And I did go to the doctor about that, and she didn't really know what it could be, but she referred me to physiotherapy, which made no difference. Eventually, I took myself to a cranial osteopath, and that seemed to help. I mean, whether it was the cranial osteopathy or not, I don't know. And I think also around about that time, I discovered yoga. Well, I discovered yoga before that, but I took it up quite religiously around about that time. So I think maybe the combination of movement, I don't know, but also the yoga it created that bubble that I could go into for an hour or so and just escape the bombardment of family life and children and whatever else was being thrown at you at the time. So aching joints. Oh, I had about a year of really, really bad dry eyes, which again, I was actually reading an article yesterday on a website. It was called ocular dryness or something. And again, because we've got estrogen receptors in all parts of our body, everything dries up, as we know, including our eyeballs, which of course I hadn't realised. They start producing less tears. And that was really horrible. I mean, I thought I had eye infections. I went to the doctor, I went to the opticians. They tried me on all sorts of antibiotic eye drops, etc., etc. And it was horrible. They were just constantly streaming and swollen. And I couldn't look at a screen for more than 2 minutes. I couldn't read. And that lasted for about 9 months. Eventually, I was referred to the eye hospital. The guy that I saw, he just sort of said, "Oh, it's because of your age." And he was so dismissive. He said, when you get older, everything starts drying up. Your skin gets dry, your eyeballs get dry. Go away virtually. But he could have actually said, experience. And this was a few years ago. Again, I didn't join the dots. Okay, it was to do with aging, but he didn't say it was because you've got estrogen receptors everywhere and your estrogen levels have plummeted, and maybe you need to think of taking some estrogen supplements. Nobody ever suggested that. And that took 9 months for me to get that appointment, just to be told it's because you're getting old. It's just like, seriously? I have heard that tinnitus is apparently quite common, which again I had for about a year, and that just kind of went. And also plantar fasciitis. Yes. Which I hadn't realised, but I think again, I don't know if that's it's not obviously one of the main symptoms, but I do, when I got plantar fasciitis, which is terribly painful in your foot, and started maybe saying to other people, and the number of women in their mid-50s who were not overweight and who were not Olympic sports women, which is what they say is usually the cause of it, they were all suffering as well. And when I look back on that and I think, well, maybe that's also got something to do, we're all menopausal women, maybe it's something to do with the lack of estrogen in our bodies. I mean, obviously, every medication has some risks, but I think women need to have the information about the different types of HRT and what the risks are in relation to their own lifestyle, because depending on our lifestyle, obviously, will have an impact on the risk factor when it comes to long-term health. And that just sort of brings me on to the other thing that I felt quite angry about, having never had a doctor suggest maybe you need to have your hormones topped up. I had no idea, and I think a lot of women still obviously don't have any idea about the potential long-term risks of the menopause. Mm-hmm. In other words, the long-term risk of not having estrogen in our bodies. And that is a well-established fact that it can lead to cardiovascular disease and osteoporosis. And because we're living longer, post-menopause, we could hopefully have another 30 odd years to live. So it's really important that we have that information so that we can kind of invest in our health now. Taking HRT or not, obviously, is an individual choice, but also just being aware of what stress does to our bodies, what poor diet can do to our bodies, and how important exercise is as well. And I just don't think we've had that information. I think the explosion in menopause and the podcasts and the interviews, and almost every time you open a newspaper now, there's something about the menopause, which is great. But Dr. Louise Newsom, who you've probably heard of, she's kind of a pioneer in menopause care, and she's the one that's created the training for doctors in menopause care, which is trying to get out there. She was just saying that even though we're talking about it and things are happening from the government point of view as well, we've got a huge way to go. There's still a lot of women going to the doctors who are being told, oh, you're just depressed, here's some antidepressants, or you can't go on to HRT if you're still menstruating. Well, that's not true. You can only stay on HRT if you're for 10 years. That ain't true. And that's quite shocking that there's so much disinformation out there and amongst the medical profession.
What I know it's kind of a difficult question. What do you feel you could possibly have done differently had you had the information nowadays?
Well, I think I would have definitely considered HRT if I had known that it would have certainly helped me manage the symptoms that I had, which I didn't realise were to do with the menopause at the time. But I think it would certainly have helped me manage those symptoms. I also had really bad sleep disturbance. I didn't sleep for years properly. So I think if I had been told about I'd heard about HRT, but I just kind of thought, oh, that's for women that got really, really big problems, but I didn't actually know what the problems were. So I just didn't think I was a candidate. I never thought about it. But I think with the benefit of hindsight, I would do that differently. I might have made some lifestyle choices differently as well. I don't know. Maybe I wouldn't. Maybe I'd still have too many glasses of wine on a night out. I don't know. But at least, again, what triggers stress. Well, if you've got the information, you can maybe help yourself a little bit more.
So you embraced the yoga. Did you make any changes that helped you, even though you didn't know it was menopause at the time? What got you through those years?
I think friends, having the support of your local community. There's a lot of very good friendships that's kind of come from our local primary school because all our kids have gone there. So I think that's the most important thing, women supporting other women. And that's what's so nice about the menopause workshops, because it is an opportunity for women to often talk about things that they haven't talked to other people about. You know, who wants to talk about vaginal atrophy or vaginal dryness at a dinner party? Not many people, and including women who haven't quite got to that stage. But it's now become a sort of common topic of conversation amongst my friends. So that's great. You know, we are talking and learning from each other, which is fantastic. But I don't know how representative we are of other women, you know. I think it's really important that we reach everybody. And what I would love to see is every GP practice maybe having one person, whether it's a practice nurse who is holder of the knowledge of menopause, and maybe just simply giving women a list of the symptoms to look out for. Maybe getting all women to come in for a sort of chat at the age of 40, you know, a bit like they ask us in for cervical screenings, for breast screenings. Maybe they could come in, maybe we could come in around the age of 40 just to be talked to about the menopause, so that it becomes normalized and no longer a bit of a taboo subject. And that information should be available in all different languages. So it's not just the white middle class ladies that get the intervention.
Do you think it affected your relationships at home with your family?
Yeah, I think it probably did. I mean, God, when you look back, you just think, it's so difficult to know, isn't it? Because menopause coincides with, if you have children, with teenage children often. Well, I had children and a baby probably who was just in his early years when I was presumably going through the perimenopause. So I think it probably did, probably did. But again, unaware that it was probably to do with the menopause. Again, having knowledge about what the symptoms are so that we don't feel that we're going crazy when we get a little bit forgetful or confused or feeling ridiculously angry about something that's not really worthy of that type of reaction. And for our family and partners to also understand that we haven't actually completely lost the plot. It is just a symptom of our fluctuating hormones and it will pass. I mean, I do have a friend who she actually came to one of my workshops recently and she suffered terribly, had a lot of anxiety and a very sort of low threshold when it came to feeling angry about things. And she'd been in this very supportive, loving relationship with her husband. They married very young. She's got 2 kids who are in their early 20s. She's only just turned 50 herself. She's very young. And she said that she was on the verge of walking out and leaving her husband and her kids because life had just got too much. And luckily she found a sympathetic doctor who said, do you know what this is? This is to do with your hormones. Let's try you on HRT. I know it sounds like I'm trying to sell HRT. I'm not. But for her, it was a lifesaver. She said she couldn't believe that she could have actually walked away from her family after 20 odd years because she just felt completely overwhelmed and couldn't cope any longer. It does affect people's family relationships. It affects everybody really, work relationships, family relationships.
For those of us who are still in perimenopause, the other side has become something of a mythical unicorn. How is it?
Well, I think it's great actually. You know, even though I had quite a few symptoms looking back retrospectively, I think I have got through to the other side really quite well. And I think I've never felt fitter, actually, maybe because I'm doing so much yoga. But I'm also excited about what I want to do over the next few years. I don't really think about my age, but I just think, you know, I've got so much to look forward to, really. And I am fit and healthy and very grateful for that, very appreciative that I am. So I think one of the things we were taught on our menopause yoga training, we kind of looked at the Eastern philosophies a little bit and how in traditional Chinese medicine they talk about women coming through the menopause and entering their second spring, having rejuvenated and rested and nurtured themselves towards the end of the menopausal period. And I think that's a lovely concept that, you know, if you take care and invest in your health while you're going through all this, then you will come out the other end ready to take, well, I feel like I'm taking on the menopause a little bit and wanting to make sure that everybody gets the information they need. But there's so many opportunities, it's, certainly not a time to think, oh, I'm getting old, I better sit down and watch telly for the rest of my life or whatever. So yeah, I think there are lots of positives. And there's no reason why the next third of our life isn't as good as the previous ones.
What does your second spring look like then for you?
Well, I mean, I'm still working. I mean, I'll probably have to carry on working because of finances. I think I probably entered my second spring when I just made the decision to do my yoga teacher training, which was about 3 years ago now. So did it quite recently. Inevitably, I was the eldest person on the course because most of my fellow students were in their 30s, actually. And I had put off yoga teacher training for years. It was something I'd wanted to do for a long, long time. But I always managed to put it off, partly because my kids were younger, but a lot was to do with my self-confidence. And I think that's a really important thing, that women going through the menopause can have a huge loss of confidence, sometimes to do with the symptoms, which maybe has a bit of a knock-on effect at work. But also as our kids get older, they seem to need us less. They don't, by the way. But but yet it changes, and you do sometimes feel marginalised. I think you do come to a bit of a crisis when you think, is this it? And I think I probably went through that as well. But then I just had a bit of a light bulb moment a few years ago and thought, you know what, I'm just going to bloody do it. I'm just going to do the training. I don't care if I'm going to be the oldest person on the course. And I'm so glad I did it. I absolutely loved it. And was really inspired by it. And I'm so excited about learning more. I've just signed up for all these extra training classes. So I just think it's great to find something, whatever that might be. I think the future is really positive.
So how are you preparing your daughter for what is to come?
Wow, that's an interesting one. She's lived away from home now for a long time. I mean, she comes back and forth. She's not really been around during my menopause awakening, realizing that I had no information at all. So you have to remember that I have only really discovered all this knowledge in the last couple of years. But yes, I have been talking to her about it, and she actually has really bad endometriosis. So a lot of the information, I think, around diet and lifestyle, I think are relevant to her because obviously endometriosis and hormones plays havoc. With regards to my sons and my husband, I mean, I think one of the questions that you've asked people on your previous podcasts has been, is your partner supportive, etc., and does he understand? Well, given that I didn't have any knowledge or understanding, there was no way that he was going to. But he does now. I mean, every time my friends come round for a coffee, they've heard a lot of talk about vaginal dryness and all sorts. They usually leave the room at that point. So they kind of understand that and are empathetic, I think. I do hope that in the future, everybody will learn about this because it does affect everybody and that it's normalised. It's part of life and it's nothing to be joked about, which I think there's still probably quite a lot of bad jokes around the menopause. Oh, she's just having a turn. Yeah, I mean, women that had turns back in the Victorian times were sent off to the sanatorium and treated with laudanum and vaginal douches made out of arsenic. So yeah, I think we probably carry a lot of that history with us. I do think the culture and the attitudes are very embedded in our psyches, really.
One final thing then, what would be your one golden piece of advice to a woman who thinks she might be entering perimenopause?
Talk to friends, look up menopause symptoms. There's the British Menopause Society, which is a very good starting point. Go and ask your GP about it. If your GP doesn't know, ask to speak to someone else who does know. Arm yourself with information and knowledge so that you're informed and then you can make choices that work for you.
And your top silver lining for those of us who are just heading towards being through?
Look forward to the future. We've got a lot of living to do.
Terrific. Thank you so much, Susan.
Thank you.
Really appreciate it.
Oh, lovely to meet you.
If you're interested in speaking to Susan about her menopause workshops, you can send her an email at susanbowman09@sky.com. I'll put the details in the show notes. Follow us on the podcast apps so that you stay up to date, and do leave us some feedback, as it's always good to know what you think. Thank you for listening. I look forward to seeing you in the next episode.